Welcome to Sculpture Vulture. I'm Lucy Branch, a sculptural conservator and author, bringing you a series of interviews with some amazing sculptors who inspire me, and I hope will do the same for you. You can see the photographs accompanying the interview, the episode show notes, and get a free novel from sculpturevulture.co.uk. Hello, Sculpture Vultures, and it's so great that you could join me for this episode. Today I'm going to be talking to Hamish Mackie, a very fine wildlife sculptor who has work in many places, including Blenheim Palace and Kew Gardens. In 2016, he was awarded the Public Monuments and Sculpture Association's Marsh Award for Excellence in Public Fountains for the Goodman's Fields horses. Really worth a visit if you're ever in London. I begin our discussion today by asking him if he'd always been creative.
Yeah, I have. I grew up on a farm in Cornwall, so early life was always outdoors, doing things on the farm, so that was always actually quite creative or quite practical. Used to make endless sort of camps through the hay barn and that type of thing. Always doing things with my hands, and life on a farm was full of creativity. It was great fun.
So it was a real outdoorsy kind of Gerald Durrell kind of experience.
Yeah, it was actually. Mum used to have a bell that meant it was either time to eat or time to go to bed, that used to get rung outside, and that was then time to come in.
That sounds fantastic. I need one of those, though my children would just ignore me.
Yeah, no, we've taken it up here. We've got one in the house. We saved screaming at the children. It's good.
Brilliant. So was there a creative aspect like art or drawing that went alongside all the playing and things like that?
There was, to a degree. I was lucky. I had a really inspiring art teacher when I was young. I've never been particularly sort of into words and English, but I've always been creative and I've always loved making things. And my art teacher at school was very pro supporting that. So, to the extent when I was about 14, I made a little cow head out of wax and cast it into lead myself, sort of over an outdoor fire.
Brilliant.
I don't think health and safety would agree with it nowadays, but. And that's still around. So it's sort of, I'd always enjoyed making things. And I was surrounded by wildlife, and animals on the farm. So there was always lots of sort of early inspiration.
But it wasn't your mum doing anything at home of that ilk as well, or a family member that showed you the way?
No, not really. Weirdly not. No, Dad was in the army and then a farmer. Mum isn't a painter or anything. My grandfather was always quite creative. He was always making things. But art certainly wasn't considered as sort of the norm. I think a lot of our great-grandparents' generation would have sketched and drawn and made things in the evenings when they weren't watching telly. But other than that, no, there's no history of it in the family. But my brother's also doing it, so that's another weird one.
And so that was something then that just came to you. Was sculpture first that appealed to you, or was it another arts side of it first?
It's always been sculpture, but weirdly, I think from a making a living point of view, certainly my parents sort of thought that it might be more sensible to do a degree in, I did a degree in furniture and product design, because I think they thought there was more of a chance of making a living out of it. I think when I was leaving school, art wasn't massively promoted. It wasn't really considered as a way of actually making a living. And there was certainly no sort of set career path to follow, so to speak.
Right, so it was, they wanted you to have something practical, something you could, pay your bills with. But, that side of it didn't appeal to you that much? Or did you find something in that side as well?
In the furniture design?
Yeah.
No, I really enjoyed it, massively enjoyed it. It was way too conceptual for my liking. But it's definitely been a really good string to my bow. I can talk an architect's language and I understand technical drawing. So actually it was really useful. But I funded it by selling sculptures during my degree course, which was a bit ironic.
Yeah. Did you train formally in sculpture then?
No, never been formally taught. Good teachers at both of the schools I went to, but I've never been formally taught.
Fantastic. So it's really your eye that informs your sculpture more than anything else.
Yeah, and I think being prepared to get it wrong.
Well, the thing is that clay is quite forgiving, plaster and things like that less so.
Yeah, big time. And I think, prepared to get it wrong, and also being prepared to hack it up to get it right.
Does it take you a long time to produce then?
No, I work quite quickly. I do a lot of, so I don't really draw. I got slightly put off drawing. It was forced too much at school, which is a great shame. It's one of my big regrets in life. I wish I kept a sketchbook going, and I do have a sketchbook, but I don't use it as much as I wish I did. So what I do is I actually sketch with my armatures, and I make my armatures so that they articulate on the joints. So I can, rather than getting a pencil and rubbing it out, and moving a leg, I just bend wire around. I bend my armatures.
Yeah.
And I can build an armature and sort of overlook what I think the sculpture is going to look like. So armatures are really important for me.
Yeah, it's quite unusual actually, though, to work like that.
I mean, actually, to go back a step, I suppose I do so much of my research, certainly on wildlife in its natural habitat. So I've been really lucky to travel quite a lot and go and look at elephants and cheetah and rhino and all the rest of it, doing what they do in the wild. So quite often when I'm starting a sculpture, I'm actually starting from a photograph that I've taken from a previous trip.
Yeah.
And by being there and taking that photograph and then going back and watching the animal in its natural habitat, it makes you look properly and you get a much better understanding of what the subject is about.
There's something about your sculpture, about the movement, as well as it's not just a form.
Well, that's cool. I mean, I think a lot of that stems probably from early childhood of being sent out on the quad bike to go and look at the sheep.
Yeah.
And I think when you're looking at a flock of 100 sheep, the only way you can spot the sick one is by watching their movement and watching their stance. And, is it standing there with a humped, hooked up back?
Yeah.
Is it twitching its tail? Has it got maggots? Is it just looking sorry for itself?
Yeah. Obviously, sculpture is a static thing, and so it's not an easy thing to be able to get that momentum into the shape and to portray it. It's almost against the material, but actually, that is something that you really feel like it might just move away when you look at your sculpture. It might just wander off that while you're looking at it.
Well, that's really kind. That's definitely one of the things I love doing with bronze. Bronze is inherently strong, but it's also inherently heavy. So to get any form of dynamics into a sculpture, you've got to think quite carefully about how it's mounted, because it's not just going to stand there on its own. But because bronze is relatively strong, you can have a cheetah on one leg, or you can have a grouse attached by a wingtip.
Yeah.
And I love sort of pushing the boundaries of what we can do with casting. And the foundry which I use, Lockbund, are very they're up for a challenge, and quite often we have to internally strengthen sculptures with stainless steel pins inside the bronze, cast inside it.
Yeah, as you say, when you're doing very difficult engineering sculpture, really, things that need to be properly engineered, you have to have that extra strength, because otherwise down the road you're going to get problems, especially if it's public sculpture, which people do very bizarre things to.
Yeah.
They want to climb them, and they want to hang off them.
Yeah, totally with you. And like I did a public commission for 6 life and a quarter size horses for the main piazza at Goodman's Fields for Berkeley Group, and one of the lead. Thank you, that's kind. It was a great project.
That was fantastic.
But one of the leading Arab stallion is rearing.
Yeah.
And of course their tail wouldn't normally touch the ground, but I had to get the tail to touch the ground to have 3 points of contact so that it was engineeringly, it was structurally strong enough.
Yeah.
So I quite enjoy that sort of challenge.
But it is a challenge, because my husband specialises in small bronze sculpture, so I work on large things, but he quite often gets in small sculptures, and you would think a small bronze, I mean, how much tension really can there be in a small feature? But actually very often with the horses, that's the sculptures that snap, so they just have too much weight, not quite in the right place, because they're smaller. I think they thought, it would be fine, but actually those are the ones that end up needing to be repaired. But we get so many come into us from that kind of thing. So
yeah, no, with you on that one. Definitely the small ones to get quite thin and delicate, don't they?
So you've learned quite a bit about foundry work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky that Lockbund Foundry, where I do my casting, Simon at the beginning was a great supporter and sort of encouraged me to get involved with it. And I have learned how the process works, and I'm interested in how the process works, and I actually do all my own patinas, which is something that not all sculptors do.
Very few, yeah.
I'm not saying I always get it right, but I think it's good to be part of the process, and actually patinas is a little bit like handing it over a paint by numbers, and it's sort of the same with patinating bronzes. I think it's important for an artist to have a big input.
Yeah, well, I kind of think the surface is as much of an art as the form, really. You do get some patinated finishes that you lose yourself in them because there's so much, just such a range of colours, but also they've got their own thing going on, and it hopefully complements the sculpture when it's done well. And I've always kind of felt like the patineurs, particularly historically, they're like a lost voice in the art world, because some of them were just geniuses.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I would love to know more than I do, and I only use probably about 4 or 5 different chemicals.
Yeah.
And what you were saying about patinas having a life of their own, that's quite hard to achieve with a lot of my texture, because my texture is so deep and coarse. A chemical patination, you often get sort of lost within the texture.
Yes.
Whereas if it's a really smooth, tight surface, you can start playing around with splatters and brush marks and stippling and spraying and all the rest of it, which I can't really do very often.
In conservation, we're often trying to rectify localized damage, so there might be that the majority of the sculpture is in a perfectly lovely condition, but there'll be a disfiguring section which is starting to unbalance the whole. And so what we're trying to do is patinate in a very touch any of the original finish, but just work in a small section. But also we're working to something that has aged and has changed, because obviously the original finish will have oxidized and matured outdoors in its environment, and we end up using a lot more cold patinas instead, because of the controllability, rather than hot patinas. But the fashion these days seems to be hot patination. Everyone wants to use that. I feel like the cold patination is dying out as an art, but I'll encourage you to have a little go at that as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. So things like, quite often if you put a sculpture outside, a bronze outside for a long time, you get, I call it leaching. So sometimes it's sort of, there might be a little bit of ceramic shell left in a low point where water then gets into it and it gets damp, and you get this sort of calcified leaching coming out.
Yeah, ideally what you want to keep activity very minimal with the bronze is the every single trace of the core has to be removed, because over time what can happen is actually the core migrates outside, and you often get that at the low points, because obviously they're the hardest bits to get out when they're doing the casting process. So it can lead to a much bigger problem. But the thing is that a lot of the environmental issues we have, it's just surface damage. There'll be a certain path that the water wants to continuously take, perhaps, and that means that when you have a continual run, you may end up with a very hard line all the way down, say, the face of a sculpture, and that begins to make it look slightly demonic instead
I'm with you.
And so that's the kind. But I mean, you have fountains as well. You work with fountains, and that's got a whole load of problems because of limescale and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, well, not using bromide or using whatever they use in swimming pools.
Yeah.
My answer to that is to make the client very aware it will change colour, because there's not really much you can do about it. And also, I drill holes in the lower point so that water can actually sort of move out of it.
Ideal, yeah, very good idea.
And that does help a bit. But you stick any bronze near a water environment, of course it's going to change colour.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your creative process. Do you have a routine that you do? Do you go out walking in the morning before starting to work?
No, my routine is sort of, I'm a bit weird. When I finish a sculpture, before I start the next one, I always have a really good clean up, which is extraordinary because I was very untidy as a child. So I always start with a really clean studio, and all my tools are in the sort of where they should be. And my daily routine, I normally deal with emails. I like to have a clear head before I get into sculpting, so that I can properly concentrate on what I'm making rather than who I should be emailing or whatever. and several cups of tea in the morning, and then a good strong cup of coffee, and then I'm ready to go.
Very good. So coffee is a strong part of the creative process.
Well, certainly one strong cup, but not after lunch, otherwise I'm awake all night.
No. Okay, so you kind of clear out all the things that could distract you, and then you are able to get into that flow state and carry on from where you left off the day before.
Yes, and I think by spending lots of time looking at the animal, because of modern technology and good cameras and rapid exposure and video and all the rest of it, it's now quite easy for me to bring my subject back to my studio. So I've actually kitted out my studio so that I've got I sort my photographs out on a MacBook that gets projected onto a big screen. And then if I'm working on something really big like the horses, I've got a projector so I can really zoom in on ears and eyes and feet and muscles and tendons and all the rest of it to see how the thing is put together. And that helps me to get actually into the head of my subject, which is, it sounds a bit weird, especially when you've been sculpting turtles. So I've been holding my breath for about 2 minutes while making these turtles. And it sounds really weird, but actually it gives you a better understanding of why animals are like what they are.
It's like method acting, isn't it? So don't the actors become the characters for a while they're playing the role that they're in?
Yeah, I didn't know they did that. I suppose it is. Yeah, I suppose it is. And also it's a bit like putting together a jigsaw. So you come back with all sorts of little snippets of information which come from, the visual memory, photographs, videos, life and all the rest of it. And it's putting it all together.
Yeah. Gosh, so actually it's a big part of it is using media of all descriptions, essential for what you're doing actually when the animals are miles away.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's not massively techy. It's a slide projector on the television.
Okay, not that techy then.
But it's good, and that's a massive privilege that I've got over sculptors from the 18th, 19th century who would have had to go to a zoo to look at their subjects.
And so has there been a commission that has been a particularly difficult one for you, or is it that each one of them has their own individual challenges?
I think each one has their own challenges. I actually don't do very many commissions nowadays. I try and do what I try and make what I want to make and then try and sell it, which gives me more freedom. There's always a degree of having your arms tied when you're doing a commission, but a really good commission, the patron, the client will give you a very free rein. So actually when we were doing the horses for Goodman's Fields, I had a totally free rein about what we could do with the horses. And I think if I was going to advise anyone commissioning art, give the artists a really free rein, and then they're free, they can do what they want to do. Yeah. And you can change things as they go along. So like this recent turtle commission, I've had a really wonderful client who had a small, not very suitable area to put a sculpture in. And her original idea was she didn't want it beyond the wall height. And I've persuaded her that it was going to go massively above the wall height. And I've really enjoyed it. I think she's really enjoyed the process.
Yeah.
And nowadays you can, again, going back to technology, and because of COVID, I've started doing video Zoom things, and like we are, and you can sort of show people what you're up to while you're doing it, which is great. Any commission, whether it's public art or something smaller, it's always a slight leap of faith, isn't it? The person commissioning the work, it doesn't really know what they're going to end up with. And we've all commissioned things that haven't worked. I mean, I'm not going to give any examples, but paintings and all the rest of it. And it's, I think it's part of the fun of it.
So you're creating a lot more now, your own ideas first, and then finding the home for them. I mean, is there a place where you'd like to see one of your sculptures? Is there, or have you already done it? You've seen them where you want to?
No, that's a tricky question. I mean, I'm lucky. I've got some sculptures in some really cool places. I've got one or two public things, lots of things in nice gardens and lovely homes. I would love to do more with museums and things.
Yeah.
To get into a museum collection would be the ultimate, I don't know what the word would be, appraisal.
Well, I think that wrote a piece a while ago about how the museums, that if you look at the footprint of museums, they all over the world, they're getting larger, so they're extending. There's been the most incredible boom of building projects relating to museums, I think particularly in America more than anywhere else, but still around the world as well. And the spaces that they're creating are capable of taking large-scale sculpture in the way that these traditional buildings weren't. And so I can see that market is going to be bigger, because they're going to need to fill these massive spaces, which is always a good thing. So I think that probably is going to be the way. I think we'll see more large-scale sculpture come indoors.
Great.
Yes, we need
I'm ready.
it. And also,
Exactly.
The bronze has a much easier life indoors, so I'm all for that as well.
Yeah. Actually, we've started casting into stainless steel as well, which is quite cool.
Okay, and have you had any sort of differences with that? Noticed any differences?
Yeah. I mean, at the beginning, it was a nightmare. I mean, for one, if you try and melt stainless steel in a normal bronze furnace, you melt the furnace. So, we had to build an induction tilt furnace, and then we were pouring stainless into the normal ceramic shell, and it was turning the ceramic shell into lava. So we had
animal.
It's just a whole different animal. But I think Lockbond have cracked it, and we're now casting. I've cast an ammonite, which is a sort of, an ancient fossil, into this bling, shiny stainless steel, which is really cool.
Yeah, and do you quite like the material then? The fact that even though you can't patinate it in the same way that you can bronze.
Yes, I do. I mean, I think on the ammonite sculptures I've recently cast with it, they look really cool. And because it's stainless, they're not patinated, but they pick up on the colours of the surrounding. So, in a garden environment, it will pick up some of the colours of the plants and the flowers and the trees and the grass and all the rest of it, and the sky. And again, in an urban environment, it picks up some of the colours of the building. So it almost sort of patinates itself perfectly for its location.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's much more forgiving in terms of change. It's much more stable, so it would actually take a lot of headaches out of a lot of people's sculpture, where they don't have to worry about it quite so much.
Yeah, with you on that one.
Yeah. So if you were going to be creating something for yourself in the next few months, would it be something that, now that you've got the turtles out the way, is it something you've already thought about, or is it something that you're thinking of right now?
No, actually, it's I've got a maquette of it in front of me, and I've got this weird reaction to lockdown of wanting to make something. Fundamentally, I'm a wildlife sculptor, and I'm sort of known for dynamics, but I'm always trying to de-pigeonhole myself. So
Challenge
recently,
yourself.
yeah, and I enjoy a challenge, and I've recently done some life sculpting of the female form, which has been a totally different experience to wildlife. I've made vessels that could be ancient or modern, and I've got this wacky idea at the moment to make something which is undefinable, would be a way of putting it. So you're not quite sure what it is or why it's there, or whether it's modern, old, alien, man-made, or what.
Cool.
And I've actually started on a maquette, which I'm looking at now. It's about 2 foot high, and I've slightly scrapped it because I think I need to do it about 10 foot high, but I'm not sure if I'm brave enough.
Well, and I mean, the thing is that large-scale sculpture is expensive. So unless you know that maybe you're going to be able to get the money back on it, it can be a bit daunting, I think.
I think that's a big part of a sculptor's life. The casting into bronze is, especially in England, where you get really good quality castings, is horrifically expensive.
Yeah, eye-watering.
And I think that's why so many of us produce things at the scale that we do.
Yeah.
I would love to do big work, but I can't afford to. It needs to be a commission.
It'd be huge, a huge bill. It's good that you kind of, your identity is this wildlife sculptor, and so you've got this audience hungry for that work. So it's quite daring and it would be good for your creativity to be doing something completely different, because then I think it freshens you up a little bit when you have an alternative. But still, actually, it's quite hard to do something different when you've got people that want what you always do.
Yeah, and especially when I exhibit through one or two galleries, and they want to exhibit the stuff that you're automatically recognized for. And again, it comes down to de-pigeonholing. I think it's really important for artists not to get stuck down one particular channel. I can think of lots of people who concentrate on one subject, and after a while, great, yeah, it's one of those, it's another one of those, but move on, it's boring.
Yeah.
The creative world, I don't think it matters if you get it wrong, and I've got it wrong on lots of occasions, but I've quite enjoyed the creative process of trying to get it right.
Yeah, I think you look at it with books as well. You get these series of books, and I don't know, they make a film, and then there's one after the other, and although the originality was there, after 35 books, the originality is just not quite there anymore. Because there's only so many ways to present that formula. But the thing is that I think it's a bit different with animals, because you've got the uniqueness of their personalities, as well as the fact that they're always doing things that are unexpected, which is why everyone loves looking at, I don't know, cat videos and things on Facebook.
But also, for me, because until recently, for obvious reasons, traveling to go and look at something gave me a fresh energy about the subject. If I had a commission years ago, or a potential commission, to do 80 life-size camels for somebody in Dubai, and it would have been, it never happened. It would have been the sculptor's dream. And I got really fired up about it, and I worked out how I was going to ship life-size camels to Dubai, and I got so fired up I ended up going to Dubai and making a life-size camel, which it's still here. looking for a client. But I really enjoyed that process, and I got it wrong because I haven't sold it, but is that getting it wrong, or is that all part of the process?
Absolutely part of the process. And that's I could, if I had the huge sculpture park of my dreams, I would want 80 camels. I would commission it immediately.
It would have been funny. They're good characters.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much for talking to us today. Would you just tell us a little bit about where people can find out more about you?
Yeah, of course. I have a website which I try and keep up to date, which is www.hamishmackie.com. And then I'm on social media, on Instagram and all that type of thing. Instagram, I think it might be, and I'm slightly guessing, Hamish_Mackie, but people might have to have a bit of a dig. Can't quite remember.
Sure, they'll find you. Have you got a preferred medium that you like?
Social media, Instagram by Mar. Love Instagram.
Oh, okay. So that's probably where you spend more time than any other place.
Yeah, and actually Instagram can be quite inspiring. You can see, as you were talking about, the cats doing funny things. I've definitely had the odd idea inspired from social media.
Oh, that's interesting, because people are always very down on social media and say things like, oh, it's a waste of our time. But actually...
No, it can be quite inspiring, just to keep your eyes open.
Yeah, well, sculpture's always what inspires me, so that's where I get all my ideas, all my best ideas from, I think. So keep working.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you.
What I wouldn't give to have 80 life-size bronze camels. I'm really sorry that he never got to make that collection, and I think the world is definitely a poorer place for it. I think what's really interesting about Hamish is that he credits his artistic roots as coming from the freedom and endless play that he enjoyed as a boy. And I can really relate to that. I had an incredibly free childhood, riding all over the place with my great friend Tracy. And I know riding around sounds very grand indeed, but we really did have very modest little steeds who cost the princely sum of about £100 and were tough little ponies. And we actually rode them in and around Bradford, which, as many people in the UK will know, is not the most glamorous city in the country. But we set off in the morning and we were out all day long, most of the days, and didn't come home until the last possible moments. And I do kind of worry that my kids are growing up a bit like battery farm chickens, caged up in London. But one thing I do have absolute confidence in is that creativity finds a way. much like life, and I do wish I could give them a little bit more of what I had, and definitely I wish I could give them a few more bronze camels. Coming up in the next episode is Amy Goodman, who's probably best known for her equestrian sculptures, but just to mention those would do her a huge disservice because she's done so much more than that. She really has an incredibly wide-ranging ability, and her focus is always to capture the movement and character of her subjects, whether that's bronze portraiture or a few lines of steel. So do join us to listen into her in the next episode. If you're looking for a new book, please consider one of my novels about the dark side of the art world, where sculpture is always at the heart of the story. You can get them on the show website, on the usual online retailers, or even better, keep your local library alive, ask for them in there. Thank you for joining me today. Sculpture Vulture has been brought to you by Antique Bronze.